Hi guys, so many of you are wondering, what am I doing in a cockpit of a race car? Well, the answer is I'm here with my dad, Arie Luyendyk, two-time Indianapolis 500 winner, and he's gonna give us some tips on business and racing and how they're related. I'm just going to start off with saying, how did you get started with racing?
Well, my dad was in racing, so your grandfather was racing, and I used to go to all the races with him, and I was like really a big fan of his, but I never thought about getting into racing. But at the time, your Aunt Nell was married to a guy called Fer, and Fer always used to be at our house, and they talked about racing and cars. There was always the discussion going on, and he was going to go into this driving school to get his license so that he could race the following year. And as the weeks went on, and then he bought a car, and then he entered into the school, and then they said, you know, we could share that car with you, so I could share the car with him. He would drive in the morning, I would drive a little bit in the morning, and we would kind of alternate. And so I said, yeah, that's a great idea, I'll try it, I'd love to try it. So that's how I got started. You know, I wasn't really one of those kids that was tapping my dad on the shoulder all the time, like, you know, I want to race, I want to race. So with me it was different, yeah. The passion was definitely more with my dad than it was with me. But the passion with me came after I started driving. Then I realized this is what I want to do.
That's great. And what was your breakthrough moment when you, because just going back in time, you went through a couple different racing leagues to the point where you reached IndyCar. What was the breakthrough moment that you got into IndyCar, and how did you do it?
Well, first of all, I think that to achieve success, you can't really do it without the help of other people around you, like a team of people that believes in you and that wants to support you. And not just sponsors, but that could be individuals. And I had a few people along the way that supported me a lot, that had no business in racing. They weren't getting anything back, but they liked what I did, and they also wanted to support me because I guess they liked me, you know. I think personality is a great part of doing any kind of hobby, business, or sport. But the breakthrough moment as far as IndyCar goes was definitely winning Indianapolis in 1990. But the breakthrough moment started way back then, like I told you before, the racing school in the Netherlands. We would have to follow the lead instructor. We'd follow the guy around the racetrack. He would show us the lines and all these little details. But then the first Saturday, I think it was either, doesn't matter what day, but the first time they allowed us to go and drive on our own, and they would take lap times. And in racing, it's kind of like the bottom line of racing is you got to be fast on the watch. The watch tells all the stories. Yeah. And so that day I ended up being the fastest of all the students. And there were a bunch of, you know, I was really young, I was 18, which is not that young these days anymore for racing, but that gave me so much confidence that, wow, I'm kind of good at this. And that's what the moment was for me to go forward. Because let's say I would have been really slow, and I would have been like a little scared and like tentative and not really into it, then that would have meant right away, you know, you have to find a different hobby or a different career. But that kind of pushed me forward.
And now it is up to their driver, in this case Arie Luyendyk, leading, turned the last lap, 217.8, place Bobby Rahal.
Arie Luyendyk, 36 years old, half a lap now from having that monkey of winless streaks off of his back.
What a race to win.
An incredible win it will be, and at an incredible pace.
185 miles an hour. Your name goes in the record book as the fastest 500-mile race winner ever.
So then bringing to winning or being competitive, 1990 and 97 you won the Indianapolis 500. Was there one specific thing besides the team? What about your personal drive during those 2 days? What was the one thing that stood out in your mind as far as a competitor that made you win that day?
I think the big difference was, the difference in winning and not winning was the fact that the morning before the race, getting ready for the race, I just had the confidence, and inside me, I felt, yeah, I can win today. Just have to get everything right. And it happened that way. But it also happened with a little bit of luck, because a race like that, or like the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 500 miles of Indianapolis, races like that, one little bad pit stop and you lost the race. So all the pit stops were great. I didn't have any mechanical issues.
Right, everything ran smooth.
Yeah, but I think the confidence factor it's the same in business. So you have a product or you have a company and you really stand behind it and it's good. Mm-hmm. Some people might say, no, it's not good, but it's good.
Right.
But you have to be realistic. Then you're going to succeed.
All right, so Dad, this is one thing I'm really curious about, since I'm not going forth in a racing career. So, but first of all, first question, what type of mindset did you need in racing to be competitive and successful?
Well, I've always been described as that I was too nice, so any of my competitors, I've never had a relationship where I hate that guy. I've never had that. And you have a lot of guys like that, drivers. They just don't get along and they don't talk to others, they keep to themselves. But once I had my helmet on, then they weren't friends anymore. So outside the car pit, I was just normal with everybody, but inside I got down to business. And even if it was one of my better friends, if I had to block him for the win, I still did. So, but the mindset that you have to win is, the will to win is easy if everything is going smoothly with the racing team, because the team is about mechanics, engineers, sponsors.
Right.
Does the team have enough money to do some testing,
right,
to make the car better? So it's not just about me. You can have all the will to win in the world, but if your car isn't really working, you're not going to win.
Yep.
So it's about, to be successful, you have to surround yourself with the right people if you can.
That's a good example, definitely.
Because if you have it's like in business. If you have 3 partners in a business, and you have one guy that works really hard, one that doesn't do anything at all, and the other guy might be, 50%, as far as driven and as far as going for it, you can't carry the business on your own shoulders. So when you do have a partnership together, you have to move forward together and all at the same, level of input.
Right. So just like any successful company and any successful racing team, everybody is fully focused on winning.
On succeeding.
Okay.
Because winning is a big word. Sometimes they say, you finish second, you're the first loser, which I think is a bad expression. Mm-hmm. Because like if you look at the Olympics and you win a silver medal, you beat thousands of people, because in order to qualify for the Olympics, you need to be pretty good in your own country.
Right.
And so in order to succeed, you need to obviously have good people around you and work with good people.
So Dad, how did you go about negotiating or attracting sponsorships or racing teams?
Yeah, well, attracting sponsors, finding sponsors for a racing team is one of the hardest things there is. It's really the toughest part of the sport. But unfortunately, as a driver, driving fast is not enough. So you have to be able to go out and, you put together proposals, and you just on a hunch, you go like, well, that company might be interested in sponsoring me. And it's like cold calling. You just approach certain companies, and 9 out of 10 times they send you away, and the 10th guy will send you away after the meeting. So it's not always easy, but it's also about the people that you run into at the races. For instance, I was competing against a driver for the Dutch championship, and his sponsor by following me because I was their biggest competitor, really liked me and called me after the season and said, hey, would you want to drive for my racing team? So obviously as you go to all different races, you run into many people, and in a nice way you network. The one thing you don't do is go to another driver sponsor and say, hey, you want to sponsor me? That doesn't really work very well,
right?
Because that's just not doing it correct way, and ethically that's not correct. I've had that where people try to steal my sponsors, and then I would just call them and say, I'd get pretty upset about it because that's not the way you do it. But But you run into all these different scenarios, and what you also do is you meet people that want to represent you, and then they say, I probably could find you a ride, or I could probably find you sponsors to get yourself into this team. And long story short, for maybe 15 years, I always had to hustle a little bit.
Right.
But then finally I got my foot in the door. I drove an Indy car, and from that moment on, I was sponsored, not by going after them myself, but they would rather than come to me. Like Target. Chip Ganassi Racing had Target as a sponsor. Chip just asked me if I wanted to drive for him.
Right.
And so then I became more of an established driver, and you don't have to hustle that much anymore.
Right. So I guess, that's, a lot of people don't know the similarities in business and racing, and that's a really good example right there is networking. Everyone does it. Everyone markets themselves.
Yeah.
So you got to find a way to market yourself. What's your advice to someone who's either about to run a business or be an entrepreneur or even starting out in racing? What is one marketing tip or networking tip that you can get?
Well, these days with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all those things, you can use those to promote yourself, and it doesn't cost you much money. So that's really a cool deal if you think about it.
Yeah.
You can reach so many people for free, and if you're starting up, you need funding, or you don't have it, so you need it from somewhere. But starting up a business obviously is very difficult. If you don't have any money to start off with, you need to find people that are supportive of you and believe in what you want to do. Like any sport or any business, they're both the same. So like running a racing team is like running a business. Mm-hmm. So you have employees, you have sponsors, then you have your driver who has to be marketable so that the marketing people can sell that driver to certain companies and say he fits really well with your company to promote your products. And then there's the business-to-business aspect of life as well. Mm-hmm. Like in racing, business-to-business would mean like I would get a company that makes products that Firestone needs to make their tires. Well, that company is not involved in racing, but I get them involved in racing by hooking them up with Firestone and say, hey, you guys could do business together, but in return, that company needs to be a sponsor of our racing team. Okay. That stuff, business to business, could also apply in business, right. Where you bring companies together to make your company better.
Gotcha. That's really, really good advice. So there's people influential in your life. What common mindset would you say that these people had throughout your career?
I think hard workers, all of them, very driven, a lot of motivation. When you set a goal, you have to work for it. It's like, in racing, if I would sit at home and wait for the phone to ring for that guy who wants to sponsor me or for that guy who wants me to drive his race car, I probably would be sitting on the couch still. Yeah. Because you have to just roll up your sleeves and you have to go for it.
Right.
And along the way there'll be a lot of disappointments, mm-hmm. and that's just normal. You have to shrug them off because I think, and that's hard to do when you take things personal. Then you think, oh, I'm not good enough. It might be me for this reason, or it might be me for this reason. But a lot of times decisions are made by others on a strictly business level.
Right.
I have really good friends that are quite wealthy, and I've proposed to them to go into business with me for certain things, some of them real estate, some other ideas I had, and they politely told me no because they didn't see the business upside on it.
Right.
And that made me realize, and that I learned from that too, because they were right. You might be enthusiastic and passionate about something, but business-wise it's never going to really work. So that's why it's always important to pick somebody's brain that is successful and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You know, try and find that mentor who can help you along the way, because it helped me in racing too.
Yeah.
I could ever claim that I did it on my own.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I'm in the car by myself, but
So,
to get there, I had a lot of help along the way.
All right, so when you retired from racing, I was still pretty young. So for the most part in my adult career, I know you as the dad, and the person after your racing career. So how did you go about managing your wealth after your career, or finding other things keeping you busy that that you love to do? Take us through that.
Well, I didn't manage my wealth to begin with very well, because when I stopped racing, Arie Jr. was kind of starting racing. So I supported him not just by being there and trying to arrange things, but also financially. So that's another good lesson. Don't ever fund your own racing program.
Yeah.
We did have sponsors, of course, but I did have to contribute a little bit to keep it going for a while. But I stayed involved in racing for quite a bit. So I coached a few drivers. I got involved with the television side of racing, so I was a commentator for a year and a half. And then I was a pace car driver. At one point I did that. At the moment I'm still involved in racing. I'm a race steward. It's like a referee for racing, so I go to all the races. So I've always kept kind of busy in racing, but there were about 4 or 5 years that I didn't really do much. And I did do some investment properties, some real estate deals. Some of them went okay, some of them didn't go okay when the market crashed. But I always tried to, throughout my whole life, I tried to, whatever I bought, were it a new car or were it a house, that I wanted to try and pay it off. Like just, I would pay it rather than have a loan from the bank or credit here or there.
Right.
Because a lot of people get lost a little bit. Everything is on a mortgage and everything is on a loan, and by the time they have a good career going, but then the career stops and then they have to find their way in life. But in the meantime, those bills are still there every month. And if you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a car payment and all that stuff, then you're in pretty good shape. So my advice would be to anybody to, whatever you buy, try to pay it off right away.
That's good advice, definitely.
But it's not always possible. Right. That's why you see so many in trouble when they lose their job, and then they get stuck with these bills, and it can get pretty ugly. So living on credit is not always the best idea.
Right. So and I know for a little bit of a hobby, speaking about buying things, so a little bit of a hobby that I've seen you do and that I'm also quite interested in, would love to do at some point, but you've bought and sold a couple cars recently. From what I got from what I've seen, mainly Porsches. So what is your advice about buying and flipping when it comes to cars or homes or anything of that nature?
I have to say that I'm not that good at it, but it's not like I'm doing it for a living. It's more of a hobby. Sometimes I'll have a car and I'll use it for 3-4 months, I'll sell it, and I get my money back basically.
Yeah.
But I just enjoy the cars and that part of it.
Right.
But yeah, I guess with anything, buying low and selling high, or buying low is obviously, and you know that in your business, it's the same thing.
Right.
That's critical.
Right.
The problem is when you get involved in a business that you're really passionate about, like a hobby, that's where the problem already begins, because you don't always go by the business sense.
It's more emotional,
right? You look at that Porsche and you go like, oh man, that car's so cool. It might be a little bit expensive, but let me buy it because it's so cool.
Yeah.
Then you know already that when you go to sell it, you're going to get either your money back or you might lose something.
So it's a good idea not to be too emotionally attached to it.
Right. Yeah. And I watch some of these. It's the same with real estate. Some homes are just so cool, and inside, you know, the way they were done up, and when they're all finished, and you fall in love with it, and you get a little bit emotional about. It becomes emotional, and then you just pay more.
Right. So don't look at it as it's a cool item. Look at it market value. How can I make a bigger margin?
It's like going to a car auction, like Barrett
Yeah.
Jackson auction. I bought a car there once where I had 2 beers, and that made me pay way too much for the car. But then when you look at a certain car, and you go, okay, that car, I'm willing to go to whatever number, let's say 30,000. When it gets to 30,500, you just need to walk away. And
Right.
that's what you need to do.
Yep.
You need to be very strict on yourself.
Yeah, right. Some of the best deals are walking away from.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's always going to be another car for sale. There's always going to be another house for sale. Pretty much everything is going to be for sale whenever. So
Yeah, that's good advice. Definitely leave emotion out of business and walk away and be proud.
yeah, and be ethical and be fair
Exactly.
towards your clients.
Right. Right. That's good advice. Well,
Treat somebody like you want to be treated.
Right. Great. Well, thanks advice, Dad. I appreciate you taking the time. And
I got a lot of time.
yep. So I'll try to use this this example of the world that my family knows is racing and how it relates to business, and see if I can take it forward. So thanks, Pop. Appreciate it.
So Dad,
Okay.
you could call me Dad, it doesn't
Sure.
matter.
Yep. I know.
How were you able to manage your wealth after racing? I didn't.
Hey guys. Sorry, cold feet.
Awesome, cool, awesome.
Yeah. Put your hands on.